guys. Okay, so we have started off this week's material talking about stakeholders, stakeholder analysis, stakeholder mapping, that kind of thing. Now we are going to be getting into a SWOT analysis, but I'm going to be showing you a SWOT analysis in a slightly different way. I know that you've done a SWOT analysis before, probably about a dozen times or more since you've been here at UQ, so I don't exactly want to rehash what you have already done. But what I have seen in my conversations with a lot of your peers in this program is that they don't necessarily know where the SWOT analysis comes from and what it means and this, that, and the other thing. And I know this because I often see people do their SWOT analysis kind of incorrectly. So this is what we're going to be talking about, okay? We're going to go ahead and talk about these are the two ways that we do our SWOT analysis. So we've got the external bit is with what we call the IO model, or the industrial organization model, okay? So this model explains the external environment, all right? And you want to know what's going on in the external environment before you are deciding your strategy, okay? So this really has to do with the industry that your firm is competing in, all right? So we've got the IO model. Now, that's what this particular PowerPoint is going to be about. The next PowerPoint is going to be about the resource-based model, which is the internal bit, which of course is what is actually going on in the actual firm itself. Okay, so let's go ahead and look at a SWOT for a second. So these are totally familiar to you. You've got your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. This is the part where I tend to see people do it not quite the right way, okay? So this your opportunities and threats is external, okay? So these are attributes of the external environment. That's why it's the IO model. And you're looking at what is going on within outside of the organization. So within the industry that the firm is operating in, but not within the industry, or I'm sorry, not within the firm itself. Okay, so that's really what we're looking at with the IO model and the external. The internal bit is resource-based. And like I said, your resource-based is going to be talked about in the next lecture or the next video. This is all of the internal bits. So this is what is actually going on within the organization itself. So I'm pointing this out because I often see people talk about the SWOT from every aspect, but really you're looking at the strengths and weaknesses from the firm. You're looking at the opportunities and threats from the external environment. So just kind of keep that in mind as we are going through this. Okay, next things. So we've got this IO model, this industrial organization model, so the external bit. We're constantly talking about both of these models are referring to above average returns, all right? So what we want to be doing is we obviously want to be getting above average returns. And there is a certain amount of profit and profitability that comes from the external, and there's a certain amount of it that comes from the internal, okay? So what we're going to be talking about here in the IO model is we're going to be talking about the external, and there are two big things that we are considering with the external environments. One is the environment of the industry, and one is the competitor environment, okay? So the industry environment, we're talking, of course, about what kind of new entrants could we have? What kind of supplier and buyers, what kind of power do they have? What kind of product substitutes are possible? And then what kind of rivalry do we have? And then, of course, we also have the competitors as well. And, of course, this is all part of this, okay? So the global environment, that's a really big one for us right now. The political environment, that's also a really big one for us right now, as is the economics. So the demographics, that's really not playing too much of a part for us at the moment. Sociocultural, it's not really like that's changed. Technology is more or less the same. So it's really these three ones that are affecting us the most at the moment, because of COVID. Woohoo. Okay. So when we talk about this external environment, what we're really talking about is 20% of a firm's profitability is explained by the industry from which it is in. And 36% of its profitability is attributed to a firm's characteristics and actions that it takes within this external environment. Okay, so what does that mean? Some of you, well, no, all of you, I believe, should have taken the casino class, the food and beverage class, the hotel class. And I'm sure that, I don't know if Andy was the one that taught the casino and the food and beverage one, but you all should have an idea that food and beverage is very low profitability. Okay, there is lots of money that goes into it. There's lots of spoilage. You really have to forecast a lot. So as a result, they did not make a ton of money. They don't make a ton of profit in food and beverage. All right. So that is, because of the industry that the firm is in, it doesn't matter how amazing the restaurant is still only going to make so much money simply by being part of the food and beverage industry, okay? Because it's the external environment that is dictating this. Okay, so there are a few assumptions that are made when we're talking about the IO model. Some of these big assumptions are, of course, that the external environment will impose pressures and restraints that determine strategies, okay? At the moment, we have a lot of pressures, a lot of restraints that are occurring and influencing the way we are doing things, okay? None of the restaurants decided to shut down during COVID. That was determined by the government. I don't know if any of you tried to buy flowers for your mothers at Mother's Day. It was impossible to do that. Why? Because all of our flowers in Australia are shipped in from overseas. So, same thing with our food. Okay, I'm not talking about flowers so much as food, okay? So a lot of our supplies, are not coming in, and that's an external environment issue. So that's a big assumption. Second big assumption, most firms compete within an industry or within a segment. They control similar strategic relevant sources, okay? And so as a result, they're pursuing similar strategies, okay? So for instance, what that means is that all of our firms at the moment are dealing with a lot, or at least the firms within the same industry are dealing with a lot of the same pressures and a lot of the same problems, whether it's a supplier issue, whether it's a demand issue, whether it's, regulations coming from government or whatever that may be. Third assumption, resources are highly mobile across firms, so resource differences will be short-lived. That is pretty true, unless you have like a billionaire who controls, has a monopoly over a particular resource. Look, resources move back and forth across firms pretty liquidly because of the capitalist type of environment we live in, okay? So a company might have a slight benefit or a slight edge with regard to a particular resource at one point in time, but very quickly that sort of advantage often goes away. Fourth big assumption, organizational decision makers are, in theory, rational and committed to acting in the firm's best interest, okay? Why is that? Because they are supposed to be making profit for the company. Now, obviously, there are some exceptions to this rule, and normally it's things like insider trading or something illegal, so this is a pretty safe assumption to include. Okay. So let's actually get on to, this is an outline, an overview of the actual IO model. And I'm just going to go through each one of these very briefly. So first we have, when we're talking about this IO model, we're looking at studying the external environment, particularly the environment of the industry. So we obviously, the general environment is important, the competitor environment is important, but really it's the industry environment that we are dealing with. Now at the moment, this is a little bit different because it is the general environment that is really the environment of the world more so than the industry that's really impacting us. So this is really the first time, other than sort of the financial crisis and 9/11 for me, those are the other two times that the external environment has trumped the way things have worked more so than what's going on with the industry, okay? So the industry is kind of a non-issue at the moment. It's really the general environment. So we're looking at that. And then what we do is we go and second bit is locating an industry with high potential for above average returns, okay? And so when we are talking about sort of this above average returns issue, this is where in the previous week, I had given you the example of the Westin Heavenly Bed. So this is where very often looking at expanding your product or service delivery comes into play. All right, because things happen, and as a result, those above average returns right now for restaurants, for hotels, for airlines, for sure, are going down a lot. They're not getting above average returns at all. They're getting really below average returns. And that is why restaurants and hotels and airlines are now using what they have a little bit differently. So for instance, some hotels, rather than renting out rooms overnight for travelers, what they are now doing is they're obviously renting out rooms for people that are in quarantine. Let's not talk about that. That's kind of, a scary topic to talk about. So let's not talk about that. But hotels, a lot of them are renting out rooms right now for people that need just daily offices to use because of where they live. They can't, work from home so easily. So this is another way that they've found to try to expand on their service offerings. Okay, next we've got this strategy formulation, okay? So having looked at the external environment, having looked at the attractive industry bit, we're looking at strategy formulation, and that is done by identifying the strategy called for by the attractive industry to earn those above average returns. So as I was saying in the previous example, hotels are not able to get tourists and travelers to come in and stay in their hotels so much. So this is why they're looking at expanding into other types of strategies, okay? All right, next, moving on from there, step number 4, developing or acquiring assets and skills needed to implement the strategy. So for instance, again, using this, I'll just continue to use this same hotel example. Now, a lot of group business in hotels has gone down significantly in the last few months, and it is slowly coming back, but still a lot of like convention, catering, those types of folks have either been laid off or made redundant, or just their hours have been cut. Well, now with more hotels opening up space to people for offices, there is a little bit more need for, servicing group meeting rooms, but then also servicing those hotel rooms and getting them the technology that they need, or if they're hosting a small group, then being able to get them the catering that they need, those sorts of things. So that's why I'm taking it to the next step and saying, okay, what is it that we need to do in order to implement this chosen strategy? Whether it's getting new product offerings, upskilling people, training them slightly differently, all of these things happen. Okay, and then of course we have strategy implementation. That's pretty straightforward. Use the firm's strengths. It may be strengths that they've developed, or it may be acquired assets and skills to implement this strategy. So a lot of hotels right now are obviously using their own staff in order to retain them. They're using their own staff to fulfill these things. Okay, and then obviously, hopefully, as a result of that, we are able to achieve these superior returns, or at least earn above average returns. Okay, so that's what really we are aiming for. Okay, so this was an okay example of how this works, but this kind of gives you an idea as to how this external environment really drives how strategies change, how we implement different things in a firm when it is kind of dictated to us that things need to change. Okay, so what is going to happen in the next video? The next video is going to talk about resource-based model. And again, this is talking about using the firm and what happens within the firm to achieve these above average returns. Okay, and they're going to go through quite a bit of detail in that. So it's a good video. But there are a few things just I wanted to preempt you with before you see that one. So resource-based model is assuming that each organization is a collection of unique resources and capabilities. Okay, so the capabilities is a really important part in the sense of what is it that we can actually achieve, what do we need to do. Okay, and so the idea is the uniqueness of the firm's resources and capabilities is the basis of the firm, creating the strategy and their ability to earn above average returns. So this big core assumption is the firm has some kind of uniqueness, they have these capabilities, they have these core competencies, and as a result of this, they have more influence when it comes to selecting and using strategies that should say than the external environment, okay? So the resource-based model is going to be dictated more by the internal and what's going on there. Okay, all right, so that should give you a basis of comparison. So once you go ahead and take a look at that resource-based view, you should be able to compare them a little bit better and understand a little bit more kind of how we look externally and formulate strategies versus how we just work within the firm itself to develop our strategies when the external environment is not impacting us quite so much. All right, thanks so much, everybody. I will see you next time.